Picture this. You're part of a galactic council that has existed for millions of years. Your species has mastered faster-than-light travel, energy manipulation, and conquered diseases that once plagued entire worlds. You've seen civilizations rise and fall, witnessed the birth and death of stars, and thought you understood the limits of what any species could achieve. Then, humanity shows up. At first, they seem unremarkable. No special powers, no advanced technology, no genetic modifications that set them apart. Just another young species taking their first steps into the cosmic arena. The council members exchange knowing glances. They've seen this story before. These newcomers will learn their place, accept their limitations, and find their small corner of the galaxy to call home. But when the greatest threat the galaxy has ever known emerges from the void between stars, when ancient species with technology beyond imagination begin fleeing in terror, when even the most powerful civilizations start preparing for extinction, that's when humanity does something no one expects. They don't run. They don't hide. They don't even ask for help. They simply say, "We'll handle it." And somehow, impossibly, they do. This is the story of how a species that couldn't even leave their own solar system just a few centuries ago became the galaxy's most feared and respected force. Not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through something far more dangerous. The absolute refusal to accept that anything is impossible. The aliens thought they knew what they were dealing with. They were wrong. Dead wrong. The crystalline spires of the Galactic Council chambers stretched into the purple sky of Nexus Prime, their surfaces catching and reflecting the light of 3 different suns. Within the Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from 412 different species sat in carefully arranged sections, each group positioned according to their civilization's age, technological advancement, and political influence. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthak hegemony adjusted his ceremonial robes as he reviewed the day's agenda on his neural interface. The Vorthak had been members of the Council for over 2 million years, their ancient civilization serving as one of the founding pillars of galactic government. Today's session would address the standard matters: trade route disputes, resource allocation, and the occasional petition from some upstart species seeking recognition. The item that caught his attention was listed simply as Application 847B. Species designation Humanity, Sol System. Zethkar's 6 eyes rolled in what his species considered the equivalent of a tired sigh. Another young race, probably barely out of their home system, eager to join the galactic community. He'd seen thousands of such applications over his long career. Most were rejected outright. Species that hadn't even achieved faster-than-light travel had no business among the stars. Those that were accepted usually ended up as client races to more established civilizations, providing labor and raw materials in exchange for scraps of advanced technology. The massive doors to the chamber hissed open with a sound like escaping steam. Council Speaker Mordoon, and being whose species had transcended physical form eons ago, materialized at the central podium as a shimmering field of energy. When the speaker manifested, every conversation in the hall immediately ceased. Even among a gathering of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations, some commands were absolute. Honored delegates, Mordoon's voice resonated directly in every mind present, bypassing the need for translation software. We convene this session of the 847th Galactic Standard Cycle. Our first matter concerns the application submitted by the species known as Humanity from the Sol System. A holographic display materialized above the assembly, showing a small yellow star surrounded by several planetary bodies. The third planet from the star glowed blue and green, swirled with white clouds. It looked ordinary, unremarkable in every way that mattered to the assembled powers. Zethkar accessed the species file through his neural link. The data that scrolled across his consciousness was even less impressive than he'd expected. Humans had only achieved nuclear technology within the last century of their existence. Their fastest spacecraft moved at a fraction of light speed. They had never left their own solar system and showed no signs of the energy manipulation or consciousness expansion that marked truly advanced civilizations. The beings who call themselves humans have requested an audience to present their case for membership, Mordoon continued. As per Council protocol, we will hear their petition before rendering judgment. A section of the chamber floor began to rise, forming a platform. The air above it shimmered, and 3 figures materialized as the transportation beam deposited them in the center of the assembly. Zethkar leaned forward, his curiosity piqued despite himself. It had been decades since he'd seen a species arrive via matter transmission rather than their own vessels. The 3 humans stood calmly on the platform, showing no signs of disorientation from the teleportation process. That was unusual. Most species experience significant distress during their first exposure to advanced transportation technology. These beings seemed to take it in stride. The center figure, apparently their leader, was a female with short gray hair and clothing that appeared to be some kind of formal uniform. Her two companions, one male and one female, flanked her with an easy confidence that spoke of military training. All three possessed the bipedal structure and bilateral symmetry common to many sapient species, but there was something in their posture, their alertness, that set them apart. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Coalition," the leader spoke. Her words automatically translated and broadcast throughout the chamber. "With me are General Marcus Rodriguez, our chief military strategist, and Dr. Keiko Tanaka, our head of xenological studies." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The human had introduced herself with a military title and had brought military advisors to what was supposed to be a diplomatic proceeding. Several delegates accessed their species' historical databases, trying to find precedent for such unusual behavior. Councillor Yixtala of the Ethereal Confederation, her gossamer form floating in a containment field designed for incorporeal beings, was the first to speak. Admiral Chen. Her voice carried the whisper-soft tones typical of her species. "Your application indicates that your people have yet to achieve faster-than-light travel or establish colonies beyond your home system. The Council's minimum requirements for membership typically include both of these achievements. How do you propose to contribute to our galactic community?" Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened. "Counselor, we didn't come here to ask for membership as a client race. We came to inform you that humanity has decided to take its place among the galactic powers." The silence that followed was absolute. In the entire history of the Galactic Council, no species had ever presumed to declare their own elevation to power status. Such recognition was granted only after millions of years of proven advancement and contribution to galactic civilization. Zefkar felt his secondary hearts begin to beat faster. The audacity of these creatures was either breathtakingly naive or dangerously confident. He began to suspect it might be the latter when he noticed that none of the three humans showed any sign of intimidation, despite being surrounded by beings who could obliterate their entire world with a thought. High Arbiter Thongol of the megalithic Dominion rose from his position, his massive stone-like form grinding against itself as he moved. When a megalith stood in council, it typically meant someone was about to be reduced to cosmic dust. "Young humans," his voice was like grinding mountains. "You speak of taking a place among powers that existed before your star was born. Your entire species spans barely 200,000 of your years. My people were building Dyson spheres when your world was still cooling from its formation." "That's true," Admiral Chen replied without hesitation. "Your people have had millions of years to perfect their technology and expand their influence." "Very impressive. But I have to ask, in all that time, have you ever faced a problem that couldn't be solved with more energy or bigger structures?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Several of the older species began accessing their databases, trying to understand where the human was leading this conversation. "Doctor..." Tanaka stepped forward, her movements precise and controlled. "We've spent the last 50 years studying every piece of galactic history and technology we could access through your public networks. We've learned about your great civilizations, your technological marvels, your vast empires spanning thousands of worlds." She paused, her gaze moving across the assembled delegates. "We've also learned about your limitations." The chamber erupted in protests and angry transmissions. The idea that a species that hadn't even left their own solar system would dare to suggest that the galactic powers had limitations was beyond insulting. It was incomprehensible. Mordun's energy form pulsed brighter, instantly restoring silence. "Explain yourself, Dr. Tanaka." "Every species in this council follows predictable patterns," Tanaka continued, as if the outrage hadn't happened. "You expand along established principles. You solve problems using variations of the same fundamental approaches you've been using for millions of years. When faced with a challenge, you apply more energy, more resources, more time." General Rodriguez spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen combat. "That's not necessarily wrong, but it makes you predictable. And predictable opponents can be defeated, no matter how powerful they are." Zethkar found himself leaning forward despite his better judgment. These humans were either the most foolish beings he'd ever encountered, or they possessed knowledge that could revolutionize galactic civilization. The fact that they had somehow gained access to the Council's secured networks suggested the latter. "You speak in hypotheticals," rumbled Arbiter Thongol. "Show us proof of these supposed capabilities." Admiral Chen smiled, and for the first time since the humans had arrived, Zethkar felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. There was something predatory in that expression, something that suggested the human was exactly where she wanted to be. "We were hoping you'd ask that," Chen said. She touched a device on her uniform, and the chamber's main display screen activated. The image showed deep space, the familiar star patterns of the Outer Rim territories. But something was wrong. Ships were moving through the void, ships that didn't match any known galactic design. They were organic-looking, flowing forms that seemed to shift and writhe as they moved, and there were thousands of them. "These images were captured by our deep space monitoring station 6 months ago," Chen explained. "We call them the Devourers. They consume entire solar systems, converting matter and energy into more of themselves. According to our calculations, they'll reach the galactic rim in approximately 18 standard months." The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates were accessing their own sensor networks, confirming the images, cross-referencing with their species databases. The readings were terrifying. The approaching fleet showed energy signatures that dwarfed anything in known galactic civilization. Councillor Yixtala's form flickered with distress. "Why? Why did you not report this immediately upon detection?" "We did," Admiral Chen replied calmly. "We transmitted detailed reports to every member species of the Council. Check your message archives. You'll find them filed under unverified reports from unrecognized species. Standard protocol for communications from non-member civilizations." Zethkar felt his stomach contents turn to ice as he accessed his civilization's communication logs. There it was. Dozens of detailed reports from the Sol system, all automatically flagged as low priority due to their source. Reports that contained precise coordinates, energy readings, and tactical analysis of the approaching threat. "The Devourers will reach the Altair system first," General Rodriguez continued, his tone professional and detached. "Based on their current consumption rate and movement patterns, they'll work their way through the Outer Rim territories before moving into the core systems. Your response time, given Council bureaucracy, and the time required to mobilize your various fleets, means you'll be fighting a defensive war against an enemy that grows stronger with every victory." "But there is an alternative," Dr. Tanaka added. "Humanity has been developing countermeasures since we first detected the threat. We have a plan that can stop them." High Arbiter Thongul's massive form shifted, grinding stone against stone. "Impossible. No single species possesses the resources to face such a threat." Admiral Chen's smile widened. "You're right. No single species following conventional galactic doctrine could handle this. But we're not following conventional doctrine." She gestured to the display, which shifted to show detailed technical schematics. "While your civilizations were perfecting energy manipulation and consciousness expansion, humanity was learning to do more with less. We became experts at asymmetric warfare, at finding unconventional solutions to impossible problems. The schematics showed weapon systems and tactical approaches that made no sense to any established galactic military doctrine. Instead of focusing on overwhelming firepower, the human designs emphasized speed, unpredictability, and what appeared to be collaborative tactics involving multiple small units working in perfect coordination. "This is madness," whispered Councillor Yixtala. "These approaches violate every principle of effective space combat." "That's what makes them effective," Rodriguez replied. "The Devourers, like every other threat the galaxy has faced, operate on predictable patterns. They expect overwhelming force to be met with overwhelming force. They expect defensive positions and energy shields and massive dreadnought engagements. They don't expect a species crazy enough to ram Feltel-capable missiles directly into their core structures," Admiral Chen finished. "They don't expect coordinated swarm attacks using ships barely larger than fighters. They don't expect an enemy that views suicide runs as acceptable tactics if they serve the greater strategic objective." The silence that followed was different from the earlier quiet. This wasn't shock or outrage. This was the profound silence of beings who suddenly realized they were looking at something they had never encountered before. Zethkar accessed his species' military databases, running projections based on the human tactical doctrines. The results were disturbing. Against conventional galactic forces, such approaches would be suicide. But against an enemy that relied on predictable responses and overwhelming force, the humans might actually have a chance. Mordan's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. You claim to possess weapons capable of threatening beings that consume solar systems. Forgive our skepticism. We're not asking you to take our word for it, Chen replied. We're informing you of our intentions. In 72 hours, humanity will intercept the Devourer advance forces at the edge of the Kepler system. You're welcome to observe. And if you fail? Asked Arbiter Thongul. Admiral Chen's expression became deadly serious. If we fail, then you'll have learned something valuable about your enemy's capabilities. And you'll have approximately 16 months to prepare your own defenses before they reach the core systems. And if you succeed? If we succeed, Chen replied, then perhaps it's time for the galactic community to reconsider what it means to be an advanced civilization. The three humans stood calmly as the chamber buzzed with frantic communications between delegates and their home governments. Fleet positions were being checked, sensor arrays were being redirected toward the Kepler system, and military advisors were running scenario analyses based on the human tactical data. Zethkar found himself studying the three figures on the platform with new eyes. They weren't supplicants asking for membership in the galactic community. They were representatives of a species that had decided to reshape that community according to their own vision. And somehow, despite every logical analysis his mind could produce, despite millions of years of galactic history that suggested such a thing was impossible, Zethkar found himself believing they might actually succeed. The edge of the Kepler system buzzed with activity as ships from dozens of galactic civilizations took up observation positions. Ambassador Zethkar stood on the bridge of the Vorthak monitoring vessel Eternal Vigilance, watching the tactical displays with growing unease. In all his centuries of military service, he had never seen such a bizarre collection of vessels preparing for battle. The human fleet, if it could even be called a fleet, consisted of barely 300 ships. Most were smaller than the Eternal Vigilance's shuttlecraft, sleek vessels that seemed to prioritize speed over armor or firepower. A handful of larger ships hung back near the system's outer planets, but even these were dwarfed by the massive dreadnoughts that typically dominated galactic warfare. Sir, his communications officer announced, we're receiving tactical data feeds from the human vessels. They're sharing everything. Ship positions, weapon capacities, strategic plans, it's all being broadcast on open channels. Zethkar's mandibles clicked in confusion. No military force in galactic history had ever shared operational intelligence so freely, especially not with potential observers who might include enemy agents. Either the humans were incredibly naive, or they were operating under assumptions that defied conventional military wisdom. The approaching Devourer force was visible on long-range sensors as a dark stain against the stars. Hundreds of organic-looking vessels moved in perfect formation, their surfaces rippling and shifting like living tissue. Energy readings indicated that each ship possessed firepower equivalent to a galactic dreadnought, and there were at least 1,000 of them. Admiral Chen's voice crackled across the open communication channel. All observer vessels maintain minimum safe distance of 50 million kilometers. We cannot guarantee your safety if you move closer to the engagement zone. Commodore Veltar of the hegemony battlecruiser Iron Dominance responded with barely concealed disdain. Admiral, our shields can withstand direct hits from stellar-class weapons. Your concern is noted but unnecessary. Understood, Commodore. Chen replied without emotion. We've uploaded our tactical doctrine to your databases. When the engagement begins, you'll understand why we recommend maintaining distance. Zethkar accessed the human tactical files, his eyes widening as he read through the engagement protocols. The humans weren't planning to fight the Devourers in any way that resembled traditional galactic warfare. Instead of forming battle lines and engaging in long-range energy exchanges, they intended to close to point-blank range using coordinated swarm attacks. The individual human ships were equipped with what they called kinetic penetrators, essentially guided missiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. The weapons possessed no energy shields, no sophisticated targeting systems, just raw velocity and dense metal cores designed to punch through any known defensive system. This is insanity, muttered his tactical officer. Their weapons can't penetrate modern deflector shields, and those ships are too small to mount proper defensive systems. Before Zethkar could respond, the long-range sensors detected movement from the Devourer fleet. The organic vessels were accelerating, their formations shifting from the loose travel configuration into something that resembled a predatory swarm. Energy signatures spiked as weapon systems powered up. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the growing tension. All human units, this is Phoenix Command. Enemy contact in 30 minutes. Execute Protocol 7. The human fleet suddenly dispersed like a school of fish avoiding a predator. The ships scattered in 3 dimensions, their movements seemingly random but maintaining perfect coordination. To any conventional tactical analysis, the humans had just abandoned any hope of mutual support, and were presenting the enemy with hundreds of isolated targets. Dr. Sarah Kim, the chief xenologist aboard the Eternal Vigilance, looked up from her sensor readings with confusion. Ambassador, I'm detecting some kind of quantum entanglement effect between the human vessels. They're maintaining instantaneous communication across their entire fleet. That's impossible, Zethkar replied automatically. Quantum entanglement can't be maintained across such distances during high acceleration maneuvers. Nevertheless, that's what the sensors are showing. Every ship in their fleet is connected to every other ship. They're operating as a single organism. The implications hit Zethkar like a plasma bolt to the chest. If the humans had somehow solved the quantum communication problem that had plagued galactic civilizations for millions of years, their tactical capabilities were far beyond what anyone had assumed. The Devourer fleet continued its approach, now close enough for detailed scans. The organic vessels were even more disturbing up close. Their hulls seemed to pulse with some kind of internal fluid, and weapon ports opened and closed like breathing orifices. Energy readings indicated biomechanical technology far in advance of anything in the galactic databases. Contact in 10 minutes, announced Chen's voice. All human units weapons free. Execute on my mark. The scattered human ship suddenly changed course, accelerating toward the enemy formation at velocities that should have liquefied any biological crew. Zethkar realized that the humans must have developed inertial compensation technology far beyond galactic standards, or their crews were not entirely biological. The first exchange of fire came sooner than expected. The Devourers launched some kind of energy pulse that washed across space like a tide of visible radiation. Any conventional ship caught in that wave would have been instantly vaporized. But the human vessels seemed to flow around the attack like water around stones, their movements coordinated with impossible precision. "How are they doing that?" whispered his tactical officer. Dr. Kim looked up from her readings, her expression awed. They're not just communicating instantaneously, they're sharing sensory data. Every human ship can see what every other human ship sees. They're fighting as a single entity with 300 bodies. The human counterattack was unlike anything in galactic military history. Instead of returning fire with energy weapons, the scattered ships launched their kinetic penetrators in a coordinated barrage. Thousands of guided missiles streaked toward the Devourer fleet, their paths weaving around each other in patterns that seemed to defy physics. The Devourers activated defensive systems that should have been impregnable. Energy shields flared to life around each vessel, creating overlapping fields of protection that had stopped every conventional attack in their path across the galaxy. The missiles should have been vaporized on contact. Instead, they punched through the shields like they didn't exist. "Impossible," breathed Commodore Veltar over the communication channel. "Nothing can penetrate Devourer defenses. We've run every simulation." His words were cut off as the first missiles reached their targets. The impact was spectacular. Not because of massive explosions, but because of what happened afterward. The dense metal cores didn't just penetrate the organic hulls, they delivered their secondary payloads deep within the enemy vessels. "Nanite swarms," Dr. Kim announced, her voice filled with scientific fascination and horror. The humans loaded their missiles with self-replicating nanomachines. They're consuming the Devourer ships from the inside. The effect was devastating. Devourer vessels that had consumed entire solar systems began to collapse as their own matter was converted into more nanites. Within minutes, dozens of the organic ships were reduced to expanding clouds of grey dust. But the Devourers were not defenseless. The surviving vessels began to emit some kind of electromagnetic pulse that disrupted electronics across vast distances. Several of the observing galactic ships had to retreat as their systems began failing. The human ships, however, seemed unaffected. They continued their attack with the same precision and coordination, their movements flowing around the Devourer counterattacks like a deadly dance. "Sir," his communications officer called out urgently. "I'm picking up internal transmissions from the human fleet. They're not speaking any language in our databases." "Put it through the translators," Zethkar ordered. The bridge speakers crackled with what sounded like multiple voices speaking in perfect unison. But as the translation matrix processed the signals, Zethkar realized it wasn't multiple voices. It was one voice speaking through hundreds of throats simultaneously. "Target Cluster 7 showing cascade failure. Redirect nanite payload to secondary systems. Phoenix 7 and Phoenix 9. Execute ramming protocol on vessel designation Omega 4. "They're not just sharing information," Dr. Kim whispered. "They're sharing consciousness. Those ships aren't crewed by individual humans. They're extensions of a single collective intelligence." The battle continued with increasing intensity.
The Devourers, recognizing that their conventional defenses were useless, began to adapt their tactics. Some vessels split into smaller components, trying to present more dispersed targets.
Others began to emit exotic radiation that should have disrupted any known technology. The humans adapted faster. Ships that had been operating independently suddenly formed into larger clusters, their hulls physically connecting to create temporary hybrid vessels with capabilities that exceeded the sum of their parts. When the Devourers tried to overwhelm specific areas with concentrated fire, the human ships simply flowed away like liquid, reforming into new configurations optimized for different tactical situations.
"This is not warfare as we understand it," Zethkar murmured. "This is something entirely new." The turning point came when the largest Devourer vessel, a massive entity that dwarfed even the greatest galactic dreadnoughts, began to emit a field that was consuming the quantum vacuum itself. Space around the creature began to collapse, creating a localized implosion that should have destroyed everything within several light minutes. The human response was immediate and shocking. Instead of fleeing from the effect, 50 of their ships accelerated directly into the collapsing space, their hulls glowing white-hot from the strain. As they approached the Devourer vessel, the ships began to merge, their matter flowing together like liquid metal.
"What are they doing?"
Commodore Viltar's voice was tight with disbelief. Admiral Chen's reply came through the quantum link, her tone calm despite the impossible circumstances. "Creating a stable wormhole terminus inside the target's core structure. Phoenix units executing dimensional breach in 3, 2, 1. The merged human ships vanished into the collapsing space around the Devourer vessel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive organic ship began to convulse, its hull rippling with internal explosions. The quantum collapse effect suddenly reversed, space snapping back to normal configuration. But the Devourer vessel was gone. In its place was an expanding sphere of elementary particles, the creature's entire mass converted to pure energy in a controlled annihilation reaction. The remaining Devourer forces, faced with an enemy that could apparently manipulate space-time itself, began to retreat. But the humans weren't finished. The surviving ships reformed into pursuit formations, their movements coordinated with the same impossible precision. "Negative enemy vessels," Admiral Chen's voice carried across all frequencies. "You came here to consume our galaxy. You don't get to leave." What followed was less a battle than an execution. The retreating Devourers found their escape routes blocked by human ships that seemed to appear out of nowhere, their FTL drives somehow allowing them to arrive at precise coordinates with perfect timing. One by one, the organic vessels were hunted down and destroyed, their matter converted by nanite swarms or annihilated by improvised dimensional weapons. When the last Devourer ship was reduced to scattered atoms, the human fleet regrouped at the edge of the Kepler system. The 300 vessels hung motionless in space, their hulls scarred but intact, like predators catching their breath after a successful hunt. The observing galactic fleets maintained absolute silence, their crews struggling to process what they had witnessed. Everything they understood about warfare, about technology, about the fundamental limitations of matter and energy, had just been proven wrong. Admiral Chen's voice broke the silence. "Observe the vessels. This concludes our demonstration. The Devourer advance force has been eliminated. Their main fleet should receive word of this engagement within the next several days and will likely alter their approach vector." Commodore Veltar was the first to respond, his voice hollow with shock. "Admiral, how? How did you do any of that?" "The same way we do everything, Commodore," Chen replied. "We refuse to accept that it was impossible." Zethkar stared at the tactical displays showing the aftermath of the battle. The humans had just defeated an enemy that consumed solar systems, using ships barely larger than shuttlecraft and weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate advanced defenses. They had manipulated space-time, created stable wormholes, and operated as a collective consciousness while maintaining individual ship functions. It was, by every measure of galactic civilization, completely impossible. And that, Zethkar realized, was exactly the point. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of the Kepler engagement, representatives materializing in the chamber through various forms of faster-than-light transportation. The usual protocols and ceremonies were abandoned. This was a crisis session, called only when the fundamental structure of galactic civilization faced existential threat. Ambassador Zethkar took his place among the Vorthak delegation, his mind still reeling from what he had witnessed. Around him, delegates from hundreds of species engaged in frantic consultations with their home governments, trying to understand the implications of humanity's demonstration. Council Speaker Morden materialized at the central podium, his energy form flickering with what appeared to be agitation. Honored delegates, we convene this emergency session to address the developments in the Kepler system. The main display activated, showing tactical recordings from dozens of observer vessels.
The images were the same that Zethkar had seen firsthand, but viewing them again did nothing to make them seem less impossible. Human ships moving in perfect coordination, weapons penetrating supposedly impregnable defenses, matter and energy manipulated in ways that violated established physics.
High Arbiter Thongol of the megalithic Dominion was the first to speak, his massive stone form grinding with each word. The question before this council is simple. Are these humans a threat to galactic stability? A wave of agreement rippled through the assembly. The demonstration of Kepler had not just been a military victory, it had been a fundamental challenge to the established order. If a species barely out of their home system could defeat enemies that had consumed entire sectors, what did that mean for civilizations that had built their power on technological superiority?
Councillor Yixthala of the Ethereal Confederation flickered in her containment field, her gossamer form betraying signs of deep distress. The humans did not simply defeat the Devourers.
They demonstrated capabilities that our greatest scientists insist are theoretically impossible. Collective consciousness across quantum-entangled vessels, matter conversion at the subatomic level, controlled manipulation of space-time geometry.
Perhaps, suggested Ambassador Teldrak of the Synthesis Collective, we should consider that our understanding of physics is incomplete. The suggestion sent shockwaves through the assembly. The Synthesis Collective had existed for over 3 million years, their cybernetic civilization built on the foundation of complete scientific understanding. For them to suggest ignorance in any field was tantamount to heresy. Dr. Sarah Kim, xenologist aboard Zethkar's vessel, had been granted permission to address the council via quantum link. Her image appeared as a hologram near the central podium. Honored delegates, my analysis of the human tactical doctrines suggests something even more disturbing than advanced technology. She gestured, and the display shifted to show detailed breakdowns of human ship movements during the battle. These vessels weren't operating under any form of artificial intelligence or computer control. Every action, every maneuver, every tactical decision was made by biological consciousness, specifically human consciousness. Impossible, rumbled Arbiter Thongol. No biological mind can process information at the speeds we observed. That's what I thought as well, Dr. Kim replied. But the quantum entanglement signatures are clear. The humans have somehow linked their individual consciousnesses into a collective network while maintaining individual identity and decision-making capability. They've essentially created a biological superorganism that operates at the speed of thought across interstellar distances. The implications hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud. Every galactic civilization had reached the limits of biological evolution eons ago, transcending their original forms through technology, energy manipulation, or consciousness expansion. The idea that a young species had discovered a way to enhance biological capabilities beyond what ancient civilizations considered possible was deeply disturbing. Zethkar found himself accessing his personal files on human psychology and sociology. The reports painted a picture of a species defined by contradiction, capable of both breathtaking cooperation and devastating internal conflict, driven by emotional responses that often superseded logical analysis. If I may, he said, rising from his position, I believe we may be approaching this question from the wrong angle. All attention in the chamber focused on him. As one of the senior military advisors for the Vorthak hegemony, his opinions carried significant weight in matters of strategic assessment. The humans did not demonstrate superior technology, he continued. They demonstrated superior adaptability. Every capability they displayed was based on existing scientific principles, but combined in ways that our civilizations would never consider. He gestured to the tactical displays still showing the battle. Take their nanite weapons. The technology for self-replicating machines has existed for millions of years, but we restrict their use because uncontrolled replication poses existential risks. The humans not only built unrestricted nanites, they delivered them using kinetic projectiles that our defenses were designed to ignore. They're willing to use weapons that could destroy their own civilization, whispered Councillor Yixthala. More than that, Zethkar replied. They're willing to use tactics that could destroy them personally. Did any of you notice that the 50 ships that executed the dimensional breach didn't survive the maneuver? The humans sacrificed 50 crews without hesitation to eliminate a single target. A chill settled over the assembly as delegates accessed their own recordings, confirming Zethkar's assessment.
The human ships that had merged to create the wormhole weapon had been completely consumed in the process, their crews dying to ensure the success of their mission. Commander Velkesh of the Quantum Dominion, one of the galaxy's most advanced military minds, materialized his holographic form in the chamber.
The tactical implications are concerning. Every galactic military doctrine is based on the assumption that species value self-preservation above mission objectives. If humans routinely sacrifice themselves for strategic advantage, our entire understanding of warfare becomes obsolete. It gets worse, Dr. Kim added. My analysis of their communication patterns suggests that the crews who died in the dimensional breach volunteered for the mission. They weren't ordered to sacrifice themselves. They chose to do so. The chamber erupted in confused transmissions as delegates tried to process this information. The idea of willing self-sacrifice for abstract strategic goals was alien to most galactic civilizations. Advanced species typically valued individual consciousness too highly to waste it on military objectives. High Inquisitor Morthek of the Eternal Throne spoke for the first time, his mechanical form clicking and whirring as ancient systems processed thoughts. Perhaps the question is not whether humans pose a threat to galactic stability, but whether galactic stability can survive contact with human psychology. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. The emergency alert system activated, projecting urgent messages directly into every delegate's consciousness. Council alert. Long-range sensors detect major space-time distortions in the Vega sector. Multiple fleet-strength formations detected. Configuration matches Devourer signatures. Estimated arrival at Outer Rim territories 14 standard days. The main display shifted to show sensor readings from the far edge of galactic space. The images were terrifying. A massive fleet of organic vessels. Thousands of ships moving in coordinated formations. This wasn't an advance force like the one destroyed at Kepler. This was the full Devourer armada, and it was heading directly toward the galactic core. The main fleet, breathed Councillor Yixtala. They're coming. Speaker Mordun's energy form pulsed with urgency. All member civilizations are ordered to mobilize their defensive fleets immediately. We must prepare. His words were interrupted as another holographic figure materialized in the chamber. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared near the central podium, her uniform bearing scorch marks from the recent battle. Council Speaker, honored delegates, she said calmly. We're aware of the approaching Devourer fleet. We wanted to inform you that humanity is prepared to handle this threat as well. The silence that followed was broken by High Arbiter Thongul's grinding laughter. Admiral, you destroyed perhaps 100 Devourer vessels with your entire fleet. The approaching force contains over 10,000 ships. Yes, we're aware, Chen replied without concern. That's why we're not using the same approach. New holographic displays activated around the chamber, showing real-time feeds from human space. The images were staggering. Massive construction projects throughout the Sol system, artificial structures being built around the sun itself, and fleets of vessels unlike anything seen in the previous battle. For the past 6 months, Chen continued, humanity has been preparing for this eventuality. We've converted our entire civilization to war production. Every human not directly involved in the war effort has been placed in stasis to free up resources. Zethkar studied the construction projects with growing amazement. The humans were building a Dyson swarm around their star, but not for energy collection. The orbital platforms were weapons. Massive kinetic launchers capable of accelerating projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. You're turning your entire solar system into a weapon, he said, more statement than question. Among other things, Chen replied, we've also completed the consciousness integration protocol. Every human currently active is part of the collective network. We're operating as a single organism with 8 billion individual perspectives. Dr. Was. Kim's voice carried over the quantum link, her tone filled with scientific awe and terror. 8 billion networked minds, the processing power alone would exceed anything we've ever imagined. It's not about processing power, Admiral Chen corrected. It's about perspective. 8 billion different ways of looking at the same problem, all working toward the same solution. When the Devourers reach Earth's solar system, they'll face an opponent that can think thoughts they've never encountered. Commander Velkesh leaned forward in his holographic form. Admiral, even with your demonstrated capabilities, engaging 10,000 Devourer vessels simultaneously is mathematically impossible. The energy requirements alone would exceed anything achievable through conventional means, Chen finished. Which is why we're not using conventional means. The display shifted to show technical specifications that made no sense to any established scientific framework. The humans appeared to be planning to use their own star as a weapon, somehow focusing stellar output into controlled bursts of energy that could be directed across interstellar distances.
You're going to weaponize your sun? Councillor Yixthaler's voice was barely a whisper. We're going to weaponize everything, Chen replied matter-of-factly.
Every planet, every asteroid, every piece of matter in our system. When the Devourers arrive, they'll find a solar system that fights back.
High Inquisitor Morthek's mechanical form clicked with what might have been admiration. The risk to your own species is enormous. If any of these systems fail, then we die fighting, Chen said simply. But we don't lose. The fundamental difference in philosophy was stark. Every galactic civilization prioritized survival above all else, viewing defeat as preferable to extinction. The humans seemed to view defeat and extinction as equivalent outcomes, making them willing to take risks that more cautious species would never consider.
There is another matter we need to discuss, Admiral Chen continued. Our intelligence networks have detected similar Devourer fleets approaching from 3 other vectors.
The force heading toward Earth is only one of 4 major invasions. The chamber erupted in panic as delegates accessed their sensor networks, confirming the human intelligence. 4 separate Devourer armadas were approaching galactic civilization from different directions, their combined forces numbering over 40,000 vessels. It's a coordinated attack, Zethkar realized. They're not just trying to consume individual systems, they're trying to destroy galactic civilization entirely. Which brings us to our proposal, Chen said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Humanity is prepared to engage all 4 fleets simultaneously. We have the resources and capabilities to handle a threat of this magnitude. But we'll need the cooperation of the galactic community. Speaker Mordoon's energy form flickered with confusion. What kind of cooperation? Stand down your military forces and allow us to operate freely throughout galactic space. Don't interfere with our operations, don't try to second-guess our tactics, and don't attempt to provide assistance unless specifically requested. The request was unprecedented in galactic history. No single species had ever asked for complete military autonomy across the entire galaxy. The political implications were staggering. You're asking us to surrender all defensive authority to your species, High Arbiter Thungol rumbled. We're asking you to let us save your civilizations, Admiral Chen replied. The alternative is that everyone dies fighting individually and unsuccessfully. As the council session continued into its 6th hour, Zethkar found himself studying the human admiral with new understanding. She wasn't negotiating or making requests. She was stating facts and allowing the galactic powers to decide how to respond to them. Humanity had looked at an impossible situation and decided to make it possible through sheer determination and willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. Now they were offering that same approach to civilizations that had forgotten what it meant to risk everything for an uncertain outcome. The question wasn't whether the humans could defeat 4 Devourer fleets simultaneously. The question was whether galactic civilization was ready to discover what victory looked like when achieved by a species that refused to accept defeat. 3 days after the emergency council session, Ambassador Zethkar found himself aboard a human vessel for the first time in his career. The ship, designated Persistence of Memory, was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Its corridors seemed to shift and reconfigure themselves as he walked, and the walls themselves appeared to be alive, pulsing with some kind of organic rhythm. His escort, a human female named Captain Lisa Park, walked beside him with the easy confidence he'd come to associate with her species. She was part of the collective consciousness network, her eyes occasionally unfocusing as she accessed information from other human minds across the galaxy. Ambassador, she said without turning her head, we're receiving concerns from your government about our operational methods. Something about excessive risk to galactic infrastructure. Zethkar's mandibles clicked with embarrassment. The Vorthak military command had been frantically analyzing human battle plans, trying to understand how they intended to engage 4 separate Devourer fleets without destroying the very civilizations they were trying to protect. My people are concerned about collateral damage, he admitted. Your proposals involve weaponizing entire star systems and redirecting stellar energy across interstellar distances. The potential for miscalculation is something we've accounted for, Captain Park finished. Would you like to see our contingency protocols? They entered what appeared to be the ship's bridge, though it bore no resemblance to any command center Zethkar had ever seen. Instead of individual workstations, the entire space was filled with a flowing network of organic interfaces that responded to human touch and thought. Dozens of crew members stood connected to the ship's systems, their consciousness merged with the vessel's operational matrix. The main display showed a real-time tactical overview of the galaxy. 4 separate red stains marked the approaching Devourer fleets, while blue indicators showed human forces moving to intercept positions. The scale of the operation was staggering. Humanity had deployed assets across thousands of light-years, coordinating movements with precision that should have been impossible. Fleet Omega is approaching the Centaurus sector, announced one of the networked operators. Estimated contact in 67 hours. Fleet Beta has altered course toward the galactic core. They're targeting the Council worlds directly. Captain Park nodded, her expression calm despite the magnitude of the threat. Redirect Battle Group 7 to intercept Beta Fleet. Begin stellar conversion protocols in the Rigel system. We'll need the additional firepower. Zethkar watched in fascination as the orders rippled through the human network. Every crew member simultaneously received and understood the new tactical requirements, their individual perspectives combining into a collective strategic vision.
Captain, he said carefully, may I ask what you mean by stellar conversion protocols? She smiled, and he saw that predatory expression that seemed common to all humans when discussing warfare. We've developed techniques for converting stellar mass directly into usable energy.
It's more efficient than trying to collect and focus natural stellar output. The implications hit him like a quantum shockwave.
You're going to destroy entire stars? We're going to use them as ammunition, she corrected.
The energy from a single stellar conversion can power weapons capable of sterilizing entire sectors.
Of course, it does make those systems uninhabitable afterward, but that's why we're only using uninhabited systems. Before Zethkar could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the bridge. The tactical display updated with new contacts. Ships were emerging from hyperspace in the outer system, their energy signatures matching Devourer technology. Fleet Delta has arrived ahead of schedule, announced the network operator. 2,000 vessels, moving in standard consumption formation. Captain Park's demeanor shifted instantly, her casual friendliness replaced by the focused intensity of a predator. All human vessels, this is Phoenix Command. Execute Operation Starfall. Begin dimensional cascade in 3 minutes. The bridge crew moved with inhuman coordination, their actions synchronized perfectly as they implemented battle protocols. Zethkar watched in amazement as the humans prepared to engage a fleet that outnumbered them 50-1. Captain, he said urgently, my ship should withdraw to a safe distance. Your ship is fine where it is, she replied, without looking away from the displays. In fact, we need you to witness what happens next. The Galactic Council needs to understand what we're capable of when we stop holding back. The outer system suddenly exploded into activity. Human ships that had been hidden throughout the asteroid belts and outer planets revealed themselves, their stealth systems dropping as they powered up weapons that defied conventional physics. But these weren't the same small vessels that had fought at Kepler. These ships were massive, their hulls gleaming with some kind of adaptive armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Enhanced vessels, Captain Park explained, noticing his stare. We've been upgrading our fleet with technology derived from Devourer analysis, organic metal hulls, consciousness-linked control systems, matter conversion engines. Each ship is essentially a hybrid of human engineering and captured alien technology. The Devourer fleet responded to the human presence with predictable aggression. Massive organic vessels opened fire with energy weapons that could boil oceans, their attacks coordinated with the precision of a hive mind. Space itself seemed to burn as exotic energies clashed against human defensive systems. But the human response was unlike anything Zethkar had ever witnessed. Instead of returning fire with conventional weapons, the hybrid ships began to sing. The sound came through the quantum communication network, a harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate through space itself. As the song intensified, the fabric of reality around the human fleet began to distort, space-time bending in ways that created localized gravity wells and dimensional rifts. What are they doing? Zethkar whispered. Weaponizing consciousness itself, Captain Park replied. 8 billion human minds, all focused on the same objective, can exert direct influence on quantum probability fields. We're essentially willing reality to change according to our needs. The effect was devastating. Devourer ships found their weapons misfiring as probability shifted against them. Navigation systems failed as space-time geometry became unstable. Several vessels simply ceased to exist as the humans convinced reality that they had never been there in the first place. But the Devourers were adapting faster than expected. The organic ships began to emit counterharmonics, their own collective consciousness fighting against the human reality manipulation. The battle became a war of minds, as much as machines, 2 species of hive minds struggling to impose their will on the fundamental structure of existence. They're learning, Captain Park observed with what sounded like admiration. Faster than our projections indicated. Time to escalate. She touched a control that didn't seem to exist until her fingers found it. All vessels execute Protocol Omega. Begin universal conversion. The human fleet suddenly changed, their ships flowing together like drops of mercury, combining into a larger pool. Within seconds, 2,000 individual vessels had merged into a single massive structure that dwarfed even the largest of our ships. Universal conversion? Zethkar asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. We are converting the matter and energy of our entire fleet into a single weapon, Park explained calmly, along with the consciousness of every crew member. 20,000 humans becoming one entity with the power to rewrite physical laws. The merged human vessel began to glow with internal energy that registered on sensors as something beyond conventional physics. It wasn't just collecting energy, it was creating new forms of matter and force that shouldn't have been able to exist. The Devourers responded by attempting to flee, their survival instincts finally overriding their consumption drive. But escape was impossible. The space around them had become fluid, responding to human will rather than natural law. Ships that tried to enter hyperspace found themselves moving backward through time instead of forward through space. Impossible, Zethkar breathed. Irrelevant, Captain Park replied. Her form was beginning to blur at the edges, her individual identity merging with the collective as she prepared to join the universal conversion. Possibility is a constraint that only applies to species that accept limitations. The final exchange was less a battle than an act of cosmic sculpture. The merged human entity reached out with tendrils of pure consciousness, touching each devourer vessel and simply convincing it to become something else. Matter was converted to energy, energy was converted to information, and information was converted to whatever the humans decided it should be. When the engagement ended, 2,000 devourer vessels had been transformed into a memorial sculpture that would orbit the local star for the next billion years. The human fleet reformed from their universal merger, individual ships and crews reconstituting as if they had never ceased to exist. Fleet Delta eliminated, Captain Park announced, her individual identity restored but somehow enhanced by the collective experience, beginning redeployment to intercept Fleet Gamma. Zethkar stared at the tactical displays showing similar engagements occurring simultaneously across the galaxy. In the Vega sector, human forces were using weaponized black holes to trap and consume an entire Devourer armada. Near the galactic core, stellar conversion weapons were reducing enemy fleets to constituent atoms across dozens of systems. How? He asked. How is any of this possible? Captain Park turned to face him, and for a moment he saw something vast and alien behind her human eyes, the reflection of 8 billion minds working in perfect harmony toward a single goal. Because we decided it was necessary, she said simply. Your species evolved past the need for impossible things. We evolved into beings that specialize in making impossible things happen. The communication system activated with priority signals from across the galaxy. Fleet commanders reported successful engagements, Devourer forces either destroyed or converted into useful materials. Within 18 hours, 4 massive invasion fleets that should have taken decades to defeat had been eliminated entirely. But the cost was becoming apparent as reports filtered in from human space. Entire star systems had been consumed to power the stellar weapons. Billions of humans have died and been reconstituted as part of the universal conversion protocols. The species had quite literally sacrificed their entire civilization to save the galaxy. Was it worth it? Zethkar asked quietly. Captain Park smiled, and this time there was nothing predatory in the expression, just the quiet satisfaction of a job completed. Ask us again in a few million years, Ambassador, when your descendants are exploring galaxies beyond this one. When your civilizations have spread across the entire universe, when the very concept of limitations has been forgotten. She gestured to the memorial sculptures visible through the ship's windows, elegant structures that had once been engines of consumption and death. We didn't do this to save your current civilizations. We did it to ensure that sapient life itself would never again face extinction. Your species will continue to exist and grow and discover new forms of impossible. And they'll do it because humanity decided that the universe is more interesting with diverse civilizations in it. As the persistence of memory began its journey back to human space, Zethkar realized that he had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just the defeat of an overwhelming enemy, but the birth of a new type of civilization,
one that viewed the impossible as merely another obstacle to overcome through creativity and determination. The humans had won not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through the simple refusal to accept that victory was impossible. They had literally reshaped reality to match their vision of how things should be. And somehow, that seemed perfectly reasonable for a species that had introduced themselves to the galactic community by informing ancient powers that they would be taking their place among the stars, whether anyone approved or not. 1 year after the Devourer War, as historians have begun calling it, the Galactic Council convened for its most significant session in over 3 million years. The crystalline spires of Nexus Prime still reached toward the purple sky, but the city below had changed dramatically. Human architectural influences were visible everywhere, organic curves that seemed to grow from the planet's surface, structures that appeared to respond to the thoughts and emotions of their inhabitants. Ambassador Zethkar walked through corridors that adjusted their lighting and temperature to match his physiological preferences, a technology that the humans had shared freely with all galactic civilizations. His destination was the expanded council chamber, now large enough to accommodate representatives from over 800 species, including dozens of civilizations that had emerged from hiding after the Devourer threat was eliminated. The chamber itself had been transformed. The rigid hierarchical seating arrangements had been replaced by a flowing amphitheater design that allowed every delegate to see every other delegate, with positioning determined by participation level rather than age of civilization. At the center, where Council Speaker Mordoon had once maintained solitary authority, stood a circular platform designed for collaborative discussion. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the center of that platform, no longer wearing the military uniform that had become familiar to galactic audiences. Instead, she wore simple civilian clothing that somehow managed to convey both approachability and the quiet confidence of someone who had reshaped the fundamental structure of reality through force of will. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's enhanced acoustics, thank you for gathering to discuss humanity's formal application for membership in the galactic community. A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the assembly. The idea of humanity applying for membership after single-handedly defeating the greatest threat in galactic history was absurd on multiple levels. High Arbiter Thomgul, his massive stone form now bearing decorative modifications that incorporated human design principles, was the first to speak. Admiral Chen, I believe the appropriate question is whether the galactic community is worthy of human membership, rather than the reverse. With respect, Arbiter, Chen replied with a smile, we're not interested in ruling the galaxy. We're interested in being part of it. The distinction was subtle but important. Every galactic civilization had assumed that a species capable of rewriting physical laws would immediately seek to dominate their neighbors. Instead, the humans seemed genuinely interested in cooperation and mutual benefit. Councillor Yixtala materialized in her containment field, her gossamer form now enhanced with patterns that seemed to shift in response to her emotional state, another gift of human biotechnology. Admiral, your species has demonstrated capabilities that exceed anything in our databases. You've shared many of these technologies freely with other civilizations, but we must ask, what do you want from us in return? The question hung in the chamber like a challenge. Every delegate present understood that this was the crucial moment when humanity would reveal their true intentions for galactic civilization. Chen's expression became thoughtful, as if she were consulting with the vast collective consciousness that connected all human minds. What we want, she said finally, is to learn from you. The silence that followed was broken by what sounded suspiciously like several delegates choking on their atmospheric gases. Learn from us? High Inquisitor Morthek's mechanical form clicked with what might have been confusion. Admiral, your species has surpassed our greatest achievements in the span of a single year. In some areas, yes, Chen acknowledged. We've made advances in consciousness integration, matter manipulation, and probability modification. But your civilizations have something we lack: perspective. You've had millions of years to develop philosophy, art, culture, and wisdom. You've learned to live with your limitations and find meaning within them. She gestured to the diverse assembly around her. Humanity excels at making impossible things possible, but we're still learning how to decide which impossible things are worth making possible. We need your guidance to ensure that our capabilities serve constructive rather than destructive ends. Dr. Sarah Kim, now serving as humanity's chief xenological liaison, activated a holographic display showing the current state of human space. The images were staggering. Entire star systems had been rebuilt using matter conversion technology, artificial worlds created to house billions of humans, and megastructures that defied conventional engineering principles.
We've expanded our civilization beyond anything we imagined possible, Dr. Kim explained. We can create new worlds, new forms of life, new types of matter and energy, but expansion without purpose leads to the same consumption patterns we saw in the Devourers. The comparison sent a chill through the assembly. The idea that humanity might eventually become a threat similar to the entities they had defeated was terrifying to contemplate. Which is why, Admiral Chen continued, we're proposing something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just membership in the galactic community, but integration with it. We want to share our capabilities completely, with all member civilizations, in exchange for access to your accumulated wisdom and experience. The proposal was staggering in scope. Complete technology sharing had never been attempted on a galactic scale. The political and economic implications were beyond calculation. Ambassador Velketh of the Quantum Dominion materialized his holographic form, his expression troubled. Admiral, the technologies you've developed could be used to destroy civilizations as easily as protect them. The risk of sharing such capabilities
Is outweighed by the risk of not sharing them, Chen interrupted gently.
Isolation leads to stagnation. Stagnation leads to the kind of rigid thinking that made the Devourers seem unstoppable. If galactic civilization is going to survive in a universe that contains threats we haven't even imagined yet, we need to work together. Zethkar found himself rising from his position, his mind racing with possibilities. Admiral, are you suggesting that all galactic civilizations should adopt human consciousness integration protocols? Not adopt, Chen corrected. Adapt. Every species has unique mental structures and cultural frameworks. Forcing human solutions onto non-human problems would be as destructive as the threats we're trying to prevent. But the principle, minds working together rather than in competition, that principle is universal. To demonstrate, she activated her connection to the human collective consciousness. Her eyes unfocused for a moment, and when they cleared, she began speaking in perfect Vorthak dialect, her words carrying the subtle harmonics that indicated deep cultural understanding. Honored Zethkar, she said in his native language, your species values individual achievement within collective purpose. Integration protocols could enhance that balance, allowing individual excellence to contribute to collective success without losing personal identity. She shifted to the crystalline tones of the ethereal confederation. Counselor Yextala, your people exist partially outside normal space-time. Consciousness integration could help other species understand your unique perspective, while your insights into nonlinear existence could help us develop new approaches to problem-solving. One by one, she addressed each major species in their own language, demonstrating not just linguistic skill but deep understanding of their cultural values and psychological needs. The effect was profound. For the first time in galactic history, every delegation felt truly seen and understood by a foreign intelligence. This is what we're offering, Chen said, returning to Standard Galactic. Not dominance or subjugation, but genuine partnership. Your wisdom guiding our capabilities enabling your dreams. High Arbiter Thongal's massive form shifted, stone grinding against stone in what Zethkar recognized as deep contemplation. The megalithic dominion has existed for 4 million years. We have built structures that will survive the heat death of the universe, but we have never built anything as ambitious as what you're proposing. Because you've never had partners capable of helping you build it, Admiral Chen replied. Imagine what your architectural principles could accomplish with matter that responds to consciousness. Imagine structures that exist partially outside normal space-time, built with ethereal insights and maintained by quantum processing networks. The vision was intoxicating. For eons, each galactic civilization had developed in isolation, their achievements limited by their own unique perspectives and capabilities. The humans were offering something that had never existed, true interspecies collaboration on a scale that spanned the entire galaxy. But with that vision came risks that made some delegates uncomfortable. Councillor Voltaran of the Conservative Union, a coalition of species that had deliberately limited their technological development, spoke up with obvious concern. Admiral Chen, what you're describing sounds remarkably similar to the collective consciousness of the Devourers. How can we be certain that integration won't lead to the same loss of individuality and creativity? The question was fair, and Chen took a moment to consider her answer. The difference, she said finally, is choice. The Devourers forced unity through consumption and conversion. What we're proposing is voluntary cooperation between distinct entities who maintain their individual identities and can withdraw from the collective at any time. To demonstrate, she gestured to Captain Lisa Park, who had materialized near the platform. Captain Park, Would you show the delegates your current level of integration? Park nodded, her expression shifting as she accessed various levels of the human collective consciousness. Her eyes took on the unfocused look of someone consulting with thousands of other minds, but her individual personality remained clearly present. Right now, she explained, I'm simultaneously participating in this conversation, helping coordinate terraforming efforts in the Altair system, and working with a team of scientists to develop new approaches to quantum archaeology. But I'm still Lisa Park. My memories, my personality, my individual perspective are unchanged. She stepped back, her expression returning to normal focus. The collective enhances individual capability without replacing individual identity. I'm more than I was before joining the network, not less. The demonstration was compelling, but Zethkar found himself thinking about longer-term implications. Admiral, what happens if your collective consciousness continues to grow? What happens when you have 1 trillion integrated minds instead of 8 billion? Chen's smile suggested she had been expecting the question. We become something unprecedented in galactic history. A civilization capable of holding trillions of different perspectives simultaneously while working toward common goals. We become wise enough to deserve the power we've developed. The phrase hung in the chamber like a declaration of intent. Every delegate understood the implication. Humanity viewed their current capabilities as merely the beginning of their development, not the culmination. Council Speaker Mordoon materialized at his traditional position, his energy form brighter than Zethkar had ever seen it. The question before this assembly is simple. Do we accept humanity's proposal for unprecedented integration, or do we maintain traditional civilizational boundaries? The debate that followed lasted for 18 hours, with representatives consulting their home governments and running probability analyses on the proposed changes. In the end, the vote was unanimous, not because every civilization was entirely comfortable with the proposal, but because the alternative was returning to the isolation and stagnation that had made them vulnerable to existential threats. As the session concluded, Zethkar found himself approaching Admiral Chen with a question that had been troubling him since the Devourer War. Admiral, he said quietly, during the final battle, your species sacrificed everything. Entire star systems, billions of lives, your whole civilization to save the galaxy. Why? What did you gain from such sacrifice? Chen looked at him with an expression of gentle amusement. Ambassador, we didn't sacrifice anything. We invested everything. Every star system we converted to energy, every life we integrated into the collective consciousness, every structure we transformed into weapons, all of it still exists, just in forms that serve a larger purpose. She gestured to the view screens, showing the transformed galaxy. Human worlds where impossible became routine. Alien civilizations enhanced by shared technology, and structures that existed partially outside normal reality. We didn't lose our civilization to save yours. We became a civilization capable of including yours. As the delegates dispersed to return to their home worlds, Zethkar realized that he had witnessed the birth of something entirely new in galactic history. Not conquest or destruction, but transformation, on a scale that redefined what it meant to be an advanced civilization. The humans had kept their word. They had handled the impossible, made it look routine, and then offered to teach the rest of the galaxy how to do the same. And somehow, that seemed perfectly reasonable for a species that had introduced themselves by informing the ancient powers of the galaxy that they would be taking their place among the stars, whether anyone else approved or not. The age of limitations was ending. The age of impossible had begun, and at its heart was a simple truth that would reshape the galaxy for eons to come. When faced with the choice between accepting defeat and making victory possible through sheer determination, humanity would always choose to rewrite the rules of reality itself. The aliens had stepped aside when humans said, "We'll handle it." They would never make that mistake again, because next time, they would be part of whatever impossible solution humanity decided to implement, and the universe would never be the same.